Okay, we're back live for our final slot for today. It's going to be an interview with our special guest, Daniel Miessler. He is a security professional, writer, long-term contributor to OWASP projects, author of Unsupervised Learning podcast, contributor and main maintainer of SecLists project. And he worked for companies like HP, Apple, and recently with Robinhood. And today we will have an interview by Ruslan Kiyanchuk, my co-host in No Name podcast. So please welcome Ruslan Kiyanchuk and Daniel Miessler.
Thanks for the introduction, Vlad, and welcome everyone to the last session of day one of No Name Con 2021. It's around 7 p.m. in Ukraine right now, but in the west coast of the United States, it's only 9 in the morning, and the whole working day is still ahead. So, Mr. Daniel, welcome to Ukrainian Cyber Conference, and thanks for finding the time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
To start this, we wanted to ask a question which I think will be fairly familiar to you and will probably ring some bells. And basically, it goes. Tell us what you're passionate about, what kind of problems you like to work on and to solve, and what made you choose your previous projects and how they went.
That's a lot. What I'm passionate about right now actually is models. I'm really passionate about simplifying ways of understanding the world for really hard problems, especially something like human meaning. Right. So if you're trying to figure out why somebody is unhappy or why large groups of people are unhappy, is there a model for how reality works or how meaning works that you could put together to build a methodology similar to a web testing methodology that allow you to be more happy? So that's the kind of a big project that I think about right now. How do I choose projects? I guess I choose projects based on how ambitious they are, but also how practical they are. And I look for a meeting in between.
Great. So without a blink, Daniel went straight into the answer. Basically, it was kind of also as a joke question, because to those who don't know or who don't read his blog, this is exactly the question that Daniel recommends as the best interview question when you hire cybersecurity professionals, because it kind of brings the person and their true self, right, to the front, and helps to highlight, their passions, their interests, and what they really want to do. So we thought this is going to be a great start to kind of describe what you care the most about. And you've been in cybersecurity industry for multiple decades now, right? But I think it's fair to say that right now it's probably as hot as never before, and popularity kind of continues to rise. We have a lot of cybersecurity courses in universities, YouTube videos, plenty of materials, and still we have shortage of workforce. At least we feel it definitely in Ukraine. I think US has the same problem. It's still pretty hard to find good professionals. Do you expect this to get worse, to get better? Basically, what's your thoughts on career in InfoSec for the next decade?
Yeah, I think it's going to get better, only because it has to. I think what will essentially happen is kind of what happened to nursing, where everything was like 4-year degree required, RN. And now it's become, oh, well, I guess you could be an X-ray tech. I guess you could be someone who officially helps the X-ray tech if you do a certain certification. So I think what's going to happen is the industry is going to realize that skills and 4-year degrees don't necessarily correlate. And they're going to just start opening it up to people who have talent or people who get certification in another way. And I do think it's going to get better. And I also think there's probably going to be some government programs that just pour a lot of money into this to get people more people into the industry.
Yeah, I think it also would help if there would be more kind of standard practices, like in construction, for example, right? There are typically very well defined procedures of how to do things. And I think in security, we're lacking that. So even to do something very simple, something that's been done billions times before, just to build a website, you still need a professional to actually ensure that it is secure. There is nothing that you can pick up from the shelf and have it working for you, unless it's like very most of the time, like the hosted solutions don't exactly either don't meet the expectations, or they are very not very secure themselves. So hopefully maybe this will help.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about this industry is that it's so young and it's so dynamic. It's quite interesting. So you can have somebody who drops out of college or doesn't go to college, or they're still in high school or whatever, and they start messing around with bug bounties. And in 6 months, they get a few bugs and they're having fun, and they start writing articles. They get a Twitter account. They start putting content on YouTube. In about a year and a half, they're an industry expert, right? They taught themselves networking. They taught themselves some programming. They've got a bunch of videos on YouTube explaining how to do hacking. And they have a public website, and they're known for finding bugs in all these big programs. They have jumped ahead 10 to 15 years in their career, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you could have someone else who doesn't do any of those things, has a master's in cybersecurity. They get no traction whatsoever. They can't get interviews, right? And they definitely can't pass interviews and land a job. So the disconnect between those is so stark, right? And here's the other thing that we don't have as an early industry. We don't have a pipeline. So if you look at the military, nobody comes in the military and starts in the middle or at the top.
Yeah.
And you can't actually cheat, right? There is a set methodology. You must start at the bottom. And it's the same as like in old times where it's like, oh, you're going to be a woodworker. You're going to be a stone worker. You have to start in the beginning. You train with someone who knows it, and they move you through the steps in a method, according to a methodology that gets you to the later stages. And it guarantees that you've done all the steps before. And it's basically a formalized process, and it's super efficient at getting people into the system. And we don't have that in security. So what you have is a whole bunch of, and you have a whole bunch of hiring managers who need somebody at the 3rd or 4th level. Let's say it's 1 through 10. They need somebody at the 3rd or 4th level. They can't use somebody at the 1 and 2 level. The 1 and 2 level are saying there's no jobs, and the hiring managers are saying there's no people. So that's where the disconnect is. The ramp is not gradual enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And but like you said, hopefully over time, because it's a new industry, hopefully over time this will improve, and we'll have more defined paths and processes for cybersecurity careers. But what the next thing that we're wondering about is with advancement of technologies, right? Sometimes it doesn't go exactly as planned, and what we want to find out is, what do you think about the largest menace to cybersecurity profession in light of automation and machine learning and all this stuff, all the concerns that, some of the jobs get replaced by automation and so on. I'll try to avoid like the AI buzzword, because it's really hard to even define AI. We would need to get into that. So I'll just use machine learning, but I guess you understand what I mean. So what's your thought on this? Will we, or will big part of cybersecurity professionals will be affected by advancement in machine learning and these algorithms?
Yeah, well, first, I've got a great definition for you. I think you'll love for AI. It's the ability for a machine to do a thing that could only be done before by a human. What's amazing about that definition is that it keeps moving. And that's what happens in reality, right? Before it was pretty much anything back in the 60s was AI. And now they keep moving the bar, because as soon as something is able to be done by a computer, they say, well, that's not what I meant. I meant something else. Yes, but Larry, definition, absolutely. So I would say that the biggest threats to cybersecurity people, it's actually the same threat to any knowledge worker, is if you're not flexible enough to think about the tech and the implementation, but also think about the purpose and the meaning of the work that you're doing. So you have to be able to formulate a problem and formulate an answer as a knowledge worker and as an IT person and as a security person. So the more that you could do both of those things, the more safe you're going to be, right? Because if you can't find new problems and understand new problems, then you're going to be forced to be in the implementation pool, and you will be competing with automation directly.
Right. And what do you think? So yeah, of course, given the right skill set, there is a way for people, I guess, to stay in front of the development, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are developing the machine learning and all these algorithms. So if you're one of those or close to them, right, you should be fine. Which part of the industry do you think is going to be affected by this first, though? Because obviously some people will, or some fields, some parts of the field will be affected first and others will be barely damaged.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I do think there's a tremendous opportunity in incident response, because it's kind of the most important part of security in some senses. It's like, are we being hacked? That's a huge question, right? It's very strange though, because there's such a lack of people in incident response, and that there's lots more room for people to come in. But incident response, this is going to sound strange, but it's kind of similar to customer service in the sense that everybody needs it, and it's hard to do well at scale. And those are exactly the types of problems that AI is good at, because it doesn't need to solve the problem multiple times. It could, for certain situations, it could solve the problem once and apply it across the scale. Now, obviously, lots of different threats are different companies are different, so there's a limit to this. But I think you're going to see machine learning applied to incident response, more specifically, looking at tons and tons of data, and then doing higher and higher level stuff. So right now, today, we're below basically a level 1 analyst when you look at what AI could do for incident response.
Yeah.
It could do basic pattern matching. I mean, it's not even, well, it's barely ML, right? It's barely showing you stuff that only AI can do.
Mostly
parsing. But as it moves up into like the level 1 analyst, that's a lot of jobs that just got became less necessary, right? And here's the interesting thing about it: the ML doesn't get tired. And you could just give it more and more data, and it will do the job the same way each time, right? It's kind of similar to staring at the sky, looking at stars, and you can ask the ML, which one is a meteor that might be coming towards Earth? You can't really do that to humans, because they can only look for so long. Their eyes get tired, their attention wanders, and it's the same with incident response. So if you start to see it move from level 1 and now it moves into what a level 2 analyst can do, that would be a huge jump. But that would be another that's most people in incident response is like level 1 or level 2. Now, how long before it gets into like a tier 3 or tier 4? That'll probably be quite some time. But most of the problem is at level 1 and level 2. So I think if ML can cross that barrier, those two barriers, it's going to have a major impact on security.
Interesting. For me, I actually thought that maybe a bug bounty would be quite affected by this, because if you think about it, first of all, we have a growing database of analysis and results and reports and all this stuff. So there's plenty of data to analyze, and at the same time, we see like advancement in analysis tools, static analysis, like various automated thing. So there's less and less low-hanging fruits. So I was thinking it would be, over time, with advancement of these tools and the algorithms, it would be harder and harder to get into bug bounty, because you would only need to find some very kind of complicated bugs that need kind of cross-domain knowledge and all this stuff. And the more these tools advance, the less opportunities there will be for bug hunters. I have cryptography background, and I did a little bit of cryptography audits. And in my little experience, it's rarely some complicated cryptography or math-related bug. Most of the time, people would be saved by just at least running static analyzer on their code, because it's usually memory management or something like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. The question is, does that need ML, or does that just need visibility into the data where you can run some basically if-then, right? How much could something like SemGrep, for example, I don't know if you've ever seen this tool. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's basically a universal search language platform. So you use something like SemGrep and you just look at more and more data, I think you're going to be able to find those patterns. I think that's the general rule, is that ML and that type of analysis really benefits when you have total exposure to lots of different stuff. One thing I think ML might be able to help with, let's say, China was attacking the US and the US was attacking China, which is not theoretical. It's probably happening, or we know it's happening.
We'll get to
that. but let's say that you're evaluating all the attack surface data for every service, every port that was open, everything, right? And you want to know, what should I go after, right? You could potentially do something like a supervised learning type situation and rate the tiers of vulnerability in order to prioritize what a small attack team should go after. And so if you're looking at terabytes of open port data and service data and version data, it might be able to prioritize for you. You should go after this because it's definitely vulnerable. So I think that is probably another space, basically attack and defense, because defense would run the same thing on themselves and then focus on that for remediation.
Got it. It's cool that you actually touched nation states and more kind of geopolitical spectrum, but we'll get to that shortly. And before the next question, I'd like to remind that our viewers are welcome to post questions for Daniel either in Zoom chat or on YouTube, and we'll try to get to them in the end. I suspect the next question may spur some reaction and some questions. We wanted to talk about some problems or issues that are bothering Ukrainian citizens at the moment, and one of these is actually some web portal and at the same time a mobile app called DIA, which roughly translates to English as action. And this is an effort by the government to provide more online service, more governmental services available online. But also, since March 2021, Ukrainian parliament adopted a bill equating the digital identity documents uploaded to this application with their physical analog. So basically now you can upload ID cards, passports, some other documents, and use it as if you would have a passport on you, which is of course convenient, but to a security-minded person, right, the first thing that comes to mind are usually the negative scenarios, like what can go wrong and what bad can happen with this approach. Ukrainian cybersecurity community is, of course, concerned about this, and there are split opinions. Some believe there is a way to do it right. They just disagree with how it's been done. Some people say, like, you shouldn't just be doing it at all because there is no ways to do it securely. What are your thoughts on basically the idea, of putting something that had always been just a physical document, ID cards, passports, and sensitive information and documents like that into the hands of, basically in our phones, and making everything available online, turning it electronic?
Yeah, so to me, it really depends on the context, the time and place of society, right? If you ask me, and I'm thinking about Star Trek: The Next Generation, my answer is 100%. Let's get it all online. That's the future. Obviously, this is the direction we should be going. I find myself highly informed by Donald Trump and Batman when it comes to this. Okay, so essentially, I remember when Obama was talking about doing a bunch of this stuff, or his administration or whatever, and I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And everyone's like, no, you don't want the government to have it. I'm like, no, that's stupid, right? Well, then Trump came in, and I realized, hey, wait a minute. If you give all the power to somebody, you don't know who's going to be next, and they will have all that access, right? And the same sort of situation happened. I don't remember. I'm not a Batman fan, but it was the one with Morgan Freeman, where they built that system that could capture all the data. And Batman was like, yeah, we have to use this to solve terrorism. And the guy had to blow it up because he didn't want that thing to exist because it was too powerful, right? And you merge those together, and now you have everyone's identity in one place, in one app. You have all the stuff. It's extremely powerful. It's extremely useful to citizens when used correctly. The problem is you don't know who will be in charge of that and whether it will be used as a tool or as a weapon. So if you don't know what the future looks like in terms of leadership or geopolitical stability, then I become more and more cautious of building powerful things because I assume that they will be used as weapons. And the more I feel stable and safe, the more I want to centralize that kind of stuff. So I'm not an expert on Ukraine by any stretch. So I don't know the answer to that. I do know that the US feels a lot less stable. Europe feels a lot less stable. So I would tend to probably feel less stable about bringing everything together into a centralized place right now, just because it doesn't feel great.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I think when people in Ukraine think about possible threats related to this, they mostly think of, attackers outside of or threats outside of government, right? But also, like you said, when you bring everything like that centralized, the government itself or some people in it can also they also get much more power and tools kind of to do whatever, depending on what the services are and what the features of the application are. And I was actually when I was preparing and before kind of we had these conversations on the right with Vlad in podcasts and other places. My main point was that, well, a lot of very well developed countries in terms of cybersecurity fields, right? There is much more cybersecurity professionals in the US than there are in Ukraine. We had like only what Vlad said, like 50 CISSPs recently, and just like a decade ago, we had like pretty much none. And basically the main point that these countries do not do something like that, and Ukraine does, and there seems to be like mismatch in terms of capabilities and what's been done. But recently we actually discovered that Apple is doing something similar in some states in the US, where you can upload your driver's license to iPhone and use. I'm not sure if it's equating to probably it's not equating to the like physical document, but from what I've read, you can show it when you board the plane and stuff like that. So I guess people are moving in this direction. But yeah, right now, like we spoke in previous questions, right? There is no good kind of established means of implementing these things securely. And to me, it seems like the surface and the threat is just possibly not manageable right now, maybe a little bit later, and we should work on that. But right now it seems like there are a lot of things that can go wrong with it. But that's just my opinion. Do you see that happening in the US anytime soon? I think you would want in the future, right? But right now, do you think this is a good time to move this forward and try to work to get this done?
I do think it's a good time to move it forward. I don't think it's likely to happen right now because we're kind of fragmenting. So it's the ability to do this is slowing down, not speeding up. But I do think it's a little bit different when a private company does it rather than the government itself. And in the US, there's obviously this separation between states and federal. So there's a lot of drama around federal policies like this. I think another big thing just for building a system like this is like, who's building it? Is it a bunch of cybersecurity experts, or is it the actual, like the DMV, like the non-experts who issue driver's licenses? Are they collecting all this data about every single citizen and putting it into some unsecured system? Because what that really ends up being, I mean, we've had a million different places get popped in the US that were government organizations that had very sensitive data. OPM is the worst one. It was a list of every single most sensitive document that you tell all your dirty secrets. You have to tell the government before you get a security clearance. That database was stolen by China. So what you face in Ukraine is somebody who's not competent to secure the system. They collect all the data essentially for Russia or China to steal. And that's just what's going to happen if it's not built by experts. Even if it is built by experts, it can still be attacked. But that's the danger of centralization, is just making it a lot easier for your enemies.
Right. And we touched the topic of kind of cyber politics already a few times, but generally just wondering what, since you think about cyber politics and warfare a lot, right? And often compare it to like military tactics, and this kind of makes this question inevitable, right? With everything going on the intersection of cyber and geopolitics right now, what do you think would be the best case and the worst case scenarios for the near future, maybe for a decade or two? Not necessarily in Ukraine, or we of course have our own kind of issues, right? Russia, Ukraine, and all this stuff, but generally worldwide, what do you think?
Yeah, best case is we have all these small skirmishes kind of pick up and continue, and they stay small. And economies continue to link and become so strong together that cyber attacks become elevated to the point of kinetic attacks, and people stop doing them because it's too dangerous to their economy. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the economies break off from each other and isolate, and people start using cyber as a proxy for kinetic, and they just start getting really aggressive and start taking each other offline. And we basically have like actual warfare in the cyber world, which then obviously correlates to kinetic versions. Unfortunately, I think we're a little bit likely to head down the second path, at least short term. I don't know. I don't think too much about that, but I definitely know what the good version looks like. The bad version can go multiple ways.
So in your opinion, the good, basically this equilibrium of like similar situation we have with nuclear weapons, where like nobody's doing it just because they're afraid of retaliation. That's the best case scenario for the cyber world as well?
It's not so much nuclear weapon, because that's like a 1 or a 0, and it's like really bad if it happens. I'm thinking more along the lines of people don't consider cyber right now to be on par with kinetic, right? So it's kind of tolerated. And hopefully as we mature and we're able to detect them and do better attribution, then over time it'll be like, it's really not allowed. And everyone can see if it happens, and it's more noticed. It would be more like troop movements on a border, where it would be on the news, and people would be like, okay, don't ever do that again. So it would kind of stop because it would become more visible and more unacceptable.
Right. We already touched the topic of privacy as well. Like you said, there were some very sensitive breaches, and actually recently you had an essay on a on your blog, A Future Without Privacy, which so far we seems to be on track for predictions outlined there after the Equifax and other sensitive documents that leaked. I think it became clearer over time that the way forward is basically, instead of trying to protect the data, right, we just need to shift our mind to building systems that don't rely on security by just discovering some data about you. But that concerns mostly kind of authorization and access control. Privacy is not only about access control, though. It's also about safety, reputation, just general person's comfort and well-being. So as we continue moving in this future without privacy, and say we can build some measures to safeguard against tax returns being hijacked by people who discover your SSN and stuff like that. Say we solve that part, but how can we solve leakage of other personal data that you can't really even avoid of sharing with the world nowadays, practically, right? Whether it's medical data or just your personal things that you don't wanna be shared, anything that kind of leaks in the world. It doesn't necessarily cause financial damage to you, but it's still a distress to people. How can we? Do you think there is a way to fight that back and somehow come up with a solution to solve this?
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because it's a little bit of a misnomer or a misunderstanding. So I think everyone's data is being massively shared. Like, I feel like stolen data on a dark web is like 5% above the surface. And then legitimately, when I say legitimate, I mean legally shared data is the other 95% under the surface. So you have all these data brokers, they know way more about you than the entire dark web put together. And their information is in a perfect database, perfectly organized. It's maintained every single day. It's constantly, it has all these feeds. It has people working there who get coffee in the morning. They have a parking lot. They have a 401k, right? It's completely legal. They have lobbyists in Washington, right? So you have this mass of data and it's being shared to all the sister companies. Excuse me.
Yep, no problem.
It's being shared like everywhere. And it's just being passed around via APIs and being sold to all these different companies. And the reason that this will continue is because our experiences online are so awesome. People love, I mean, I'm amazed. I hate Facebook, but I love Facebook ads. When I go to Facebook and I get an ad, I'm like, okay, yeah, I do want to try these pants that look like jeans, but they don't fit like jeans. How did you know that I want that? Every single thing that they recommend is like amazing. And all the convenience, like all the stuff I have in my house for like automation and stuff, so much of that is powered by data. People will not give that up. They will not give that up. They will continue asking for the features that require more and more data. And pretty soon it's going to be like, tell me about all your private thoughts, because then we'll make whatever, this other thing even better. And you'll be like, oh, sure, let me upload that to you. And that'll go right to the data brokers and that'll be shared. And now your Facebook ads will be even better. So if you imagine the 95% of your data being shared legally, then there's going to be some small piece of exhaust where those companies get popped, or they have a leak, or they leave something on S3, and that gets taken to the dark web. But as soon as it goes to the dark web, it gets stale, right? The real version is in these legitimate systems. And until people actually put their own privacy above their own features, this will never stop. And that won't ever happen. People will always like the features more than the security. So I don't think there's any way to stop this from happening. The dark web stuff, I mean, that'll get better as security gets better, but the data will still be out there. It'll just be in legitimate companies.
Right. It's always a trade-off, and it seems like we get more benefits from using technologies than we have the threats. We have one of the comments in Zoom which say kind of refuse, with a smile, of course, refuse from phone usage. Exactly, like it's inconvenient, right? You can refuse from phone usage. You can avoid putting anything online, but then you can barely do anything. It's the same like in the US, technically, you are allowed not to have passport document, which is not the case in Ukraine. In Ukraine, like it's illegal, basically. In US, you can not have the ID, as far as I'm aware, but it's very inconvenient. You cannot drive a car, you cannot buy alcohol, you barely can do anything. You can only go to Wyoming and stay and hang out there for a while.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, I think the problem is that a lot of it is happening not due to not only because of like security breaches and exposures, but also legally. And it also boggles my mind how we can have GDPR and CCPA in place, but at the same time, completely legal data brokers, still gathering data without maybe you've given consent kind of implicitly without even realizing it, but at least like not without your conscious decision. It kind of was somewhere in the small print. So do you think it's also a job of improving policies and regulations around this, and that will help to kind of take that under control?
I'm sure there's some improvement that could be made there, but the problem is human nature. The problem is humans want these features that are powered by data brokers. Data brokers are offering a service, which is to make your ads and your life convenient and beautiful. And humans are saying, yes, I want that service. So there is nothing that is going to get in between those two things happening, right? That's why privacy ultimately is going to hit a wall. I mean, the types of things we should be going after are egregious, like malicious data brokers. And security breaches and dark web postings and all that kind of stuff, that'll get removed. But that, like I said, that's only 5% of the problem.
Right. Staying on the privacy issues, right? I guess it's hard to avoid this topic as well. And I know you already voiced some of your views on the blog as well, but just wanted to still discuss this for like live, because it may not affect Ukraine as much, but who knows? Basically, in your essay, right, on Apple and child safety story, you voiced concern that this may cause Apple to lose users and market share for many years. Do you still think it's the case? Because from what we see, typically different types of security issues, data breaches and stuff like that don't really seem to, in the long term at least, don't seem to affect the companies financially. If we look at Equifax, Facebook, at the end of the day, they're still doing just fine. Why do you think Apple would be different in this case?
Well, there's kind of a rule about Apple. You kind of don't talk about things too much, so I try to avoid it a little bit. But
okay,
what I would say is that company has done extremely well at PR and maintaining a very clear, singular narrative about security and privacy, and that I'm not sure they actually made a mistake too much in the tech or what they actually did. But in my mind, this was a PR issue. It was a communication issue. And I talked about it in that post, what people heard versus what they should have said, right? If they had said, look, everyone does this and we have avoided doing this for a long time, but now we finally are going to do it and here's what it looks like, I think that would have been fine. But the way people heard it was that this was the first time and they were the only ones doing it, and it just landed really badly. So I do think it will probably have an effect.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of also very surprising to me how a company who's having PR and marketing to the level where they can sell $1,000 monitor stands and $500 computer wheels, right? How could they mismessage this and other features so much? It's kind of surprising, but at the same time, just let me know if you don't want to talk about it. I was just wondering, like, for a company of this scale, typically anything that's done, right, it always comes down to some economic incentives. And I'm just trying to understand why Apple would be doing this. Do they genuinely think that this would help with safety, or they considered this as feature, but it came out a little bit different, right? For people, it was kind of people treated as a blow to the privacy, not another feature to the privacy. What do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to speak for them, and I can't speak for them because I'm not there. But I would say that they generally do policies like this because they think it's the right thing. They absolutely see it as a problem, what was happening before, so they implement a policy to fix it. Again, I honestly think that this was a communication misstep rather than a policy misstep.
Got it. I wonder, would it be maybe more convincing for people if, and I'm not sure if this is possible, but if this would be a little bit more data driven from the point of like the company of saying like, at least exposing some numbers in, hey, look, like here's how much people would stop from doing bad things, or and maybe also like how much false positives we had, or something like that, and kind of be transparent about that. Do you think first, can they do it? Because I'm not aware, maybe there is some policy that prevents them from doing it or anything like that, and should they do it, basically, to be a little bit more transparent? And like, if you show people that on average this works, right, just like with any measures, it's barely we have any measures that are 100% proof and correct and always working, but as long as it's working most of the time, people are usually okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, the magic that they have always had PR wise is the ability to say, don't worry about it, we have it, right? It's the idea of like not presenting details and just making it easy to trust and move on about your life, right? A big part of the allure is to focus on the actual creativity that you want to use, that you want to do, and not focus so much on the tools. So I think it would go against the main mantra to present a whole bunch of details, because then it sort of kicks up conversation. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of the hand wave. We have this under control. We're doing good things for you. And that's what simply did not work this time. And because I just think it was a bad way it was communicated.
Got it. Thanks. I guess we talked quite enough about privacy by this time. What I'm wondering next is basically what allows us to speak right now, essentially, is COVID, right? Because somehow we managed to be present at the Ukrainian Cybersecurity conference, both being in the Bay Area right now. But obviously it had negative and maybe some positive impact on the industry. What do you think have been the most notable shift that you noticed for cybersecurity kind of caused by the pandemic?
I haven't thought too much about it, but I imagine it's going to be around talent. I think that going more remote balances out places like the Bay Area versus places like Ukraine or Ireland or Vietnam, right? If you have extreme talent that exists anywhere on the planet and everyone's on Zoom anyway, I think you just, Thomas Friedman wrote a book, The World is Flat. I think it might've been around 2000 or something. And it was kind of early, but I think it's starting to actually happen. So I think that's probably going to be the biggest impact, is people realizing that remote workforces are an option, and like seriously attracting and utilizing talent from anywhere. I wonder how much that will be a backlash once we go back, and how much it will go back to the old way. But I feel like some of that will never go back, and we will be more open to getting people from anywhere.
Right. I think it also drove a lot of companies to expedite their move from perimeter security to more, zero trust network and all this stuff, but just because they had to, just like with remote work as well.
Yeah, I wonder how much progress they've actually made, though. I feel like people are better about starting those projects than actually doing them. But no, I agree. There's at least a lot of people thinking about it right now.
Yep, absolutely. It brings it to the attention. Did you notice, since you have a podcast and like quite a big audience, both on the blog and in the podcast patterns, did you notice any change of patterns in behavior during the pandemic? For me, for example, I typically would listen to podcasts during a commute, and now that I don't have that, I barely listen to any podcast. Did you notice any changes in behavior like that?
Not really. I think there was a big drop in the beginning. It was not for my show, but for a lot of shows where they just didn't have that time. A lot of long form podcasts where you actually have multiple people on and they kind of tell jokes and they banter back and forth and that kind of thing. People didn't have time for that. But because my thing is like 15 minutes of here's just the news, it's kind of boring and fast, but very informative. I think people kind of stuck with it. Yeah, I think that was the big thing that I saw.
Got it. And now, since we talked about podcasts a little bit, you also kind of promote the idea of creators' independence from day one. What do you think? What content do you deem the most valuable and efficient nowadays? Would it be podcasts or blogs, videos, mailing lists, maybe?
Yeah, I think two things are kind of magical right now: newsletters and YouTube videos. I think that's where everything is going. Newsletters are really powerful because they basically take an expert or an influencer, really just anybody who you respect the perspective of, and they become a filter. I love seeing other people's filters. I would love to have 5 of my smart friends tell me about the same exact issue because I hear a different thing from each of them. And that's what's really powerful about newsletters. And YouTube videos are like, they're better in a blog post. They're better in a podcast because it combines it all together into a presentation. Yep. And it kind of forces them to be concise. Otherwise, people will just leave. So it's a really powerful medium.
Yeah, for something that kind of fully brings your attention, because video you wouldn't be able to watch when driving, but for something that you can spend and focus your attention to, right? Videos are very helpful. Do you think, so YouTube has very kind of stringent decisions when it comes to, the algorithm and how they show videos, right? So shorter videos typically work better than longer, and maybe this will change, but stuff like that. Do you think it creates a big struggle for content creators to, it kind of imposes the way they need to present too much, or do you think it's fine?
I don't really know. I've not done too much on YouTube yet. I do know it is pretty restrictive, but I also know that people who thrive there are finding ways to do it and to do it really well. Alexander asked about TikTok. So Great question. I think TikTok is basically just better YouTube because all the things that make YouTube great, TikTok is kind of doing better. And the most important thing is it forces you to be extremely clear and short. Otherwise, and the algorithm punishes you, right? If you produce a video that someone leaves a quarter of the way through or half of the way through, the number one metric for all of TikTok is do you stay on the video? Do you watch it all the way through? That is the number one thing. It's even stronger than a follow or a like. If you watch the video all the way through, it's the strongest signal. Someone did analysis of that. So they recently went to like a full minute or maybe even 2 minutes. I can't remember what they extended it to, but it used to be like 30 seconds. And that's what made it so powerful. It was like going from an opium plant that you rub on your arm directly to fentanyl, right? That's what TikTok basically did. And 100%. So basically, if you have the powerful medium of YouTube and people are producing cybersecurity content or podcast content or whatever, you collapse that down into these super clean 30-second, 1-minute clips. That is going to be even more powerful than YouTube. And then there's going to be a version better than that. But I would say that this YouTube phenomenon is being enhanced and improved by TikTok, not really replaced. I would put them in the same category with the TikTok just being better.
Interesting. That's definitely a interesting point of view of this. Do you think, like, I get it that TikTok is much more kind of catchy, if you will, right? But, well, because you have to make videos catchy in order for this to work. But do you think such short videos are can be efficient in kind of getting the points through? Is it not going to be like Twitter, where it's kind of hard to talk about complicated questions because of the brevity that you are forced into?
Yes, I mean you kind of lose something. You should all check out Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. He actually talks about what you lose when you go from long form conversations, newspapers, writing in a book, writing long letters, to radio, to television. And of course, he died in like 2000, so he never saw social media. But there's a degradation of the conversation that happens when it becomes easier. So there is some of that happening. But luckily, you can link from one thing to another. You could have a 30-second version of a philosophy concept, like absurdism or something. And then you can have a bunch of links and it goes into a 2-hour conversation, or you find out about the influencer and you go read everything they produced. So I would say it's like a gateway type situation to get into bigger content. I think you do lose this something in the small form, but I think what's most important about media is exposure. So if you hear a philosophical concept in 30 seconds, first of all, if you can't explain, at least to get someone excited about it in 30 seconds, maybe you shouldn't be talking about it, or maybe that wasn't a clear articulation of the concept, right? So I love the forcing function. I love that it forces you to fully understand the concept and get it down short. Got it.
And that's definitely a very interesting point of view. And before we switch to audience questions, we're already kind of in more of a lifestyle, questions. I just had to ask, as a coffee enthusiast myself, what are your favorite coffee beans nowadays?
Phil's Coffee. Phil's Coffee is my favorite. Yes. So check this out. I went and found like a lot. I went and found like 20 different highly recommended coffee beans from all over. This was during the pandemic, and I had them all shipped to my house and I tried them all, and I ended up going back to Phil's. So now I order beans like directly from the factory. It's in Oakland. The factory is in Oakland, and that's where I get my stuff. And I've recently been using the Clever coffee making technique. Please share. Oh, it's amazing. So it's kind of like a Hario V60, except for there's a stopper at the bottom. So it gives you both exposure to the bean, but also steeping time. So rather than a V60 where it just pours over and goes through, what you do is you pour the water in, it just sits there, and you set it on the counter. It just sits there. I put it in there for like 90 seconds after the pour, which is probably a total of like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Just sits there. Then you put it on top of the thing, on top of the cup. It opens the stopper, and it comes through. So you basically get the advantages of a French press with the convenience of a V60.
I was gonna say kind of almost like pre-infusion in the espresso. I typically do espresso, so it's like a pre-infusion for espresso brewing method. Interesting. I was also surprised with Phil's, but I guess the trick is to order it directly, because like if you go to the store, they're typically not fresh there. But I guess if you order it, it's still pretty fresh, and that would work. Cool. Thanks for sharing. And I think so far we have one question. Back to the time when we talked about kind of cyber politics and geopolitical stuff and so on. Do you think China's recent gaming ban for young kids correlate to better or worse hackers in the future? Is there a correlation with gaming and security? What do you think about that?
Oh, interesting. I don't know the answer to that. Here's what I worry. Here's what I worry about. No, China didn't say you can't study how to hack the US. They said you can't play video games. So they could be providing other means of people to get into hacking, right? By giving them cybersecurity curriculum or something. Who knows? I do think there is a correlation. The correlation is curiosity and just enjoying, exploring different things. But yeah.
I was going to say that I think for security, it's very important to have this kind of curiosity and, having fun vibe, because that's what kind of drives you forward. And gaming is kind of also there, like you also try different things and also get excited about them and spend a lot of time at the computer, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it depends what you do with it, right?
Yep.
So, but you don't think it will have much effect on, the kind of development of cybersecurity professionals in China? So
no, because they're still in school, right? And first of all, it's only up to 18, but they're still in school. They're still learning computer science way better than anyone else, basically in the world. They're still studying all this stuff, and they're not going to be discouraged from learning cybersecurity. They're not going to be discouraged from finding bugs. They're going to be restricted from reporting them anywhere else other than China, but they're not going to shut down the curiosity thing. I think they're just trying to shut down, the Ministry of Culture, trying to shut down unhealthy things.
It's kind of sad that Ukraine also has Ministry of Culture, but
oh really?
Yeah, I think it's still legacy from like Soviet times, but we still have it. Cool. Thank you so much. I think we're ending the kind of time slot and the time that we have, but thank you so much for all your thoughts and this conversation. It's been amazing. And I think I'll pass it on to Vlad to wrap it up. And I think we'll be closing because it's pretty late in Ukraine now. So thanks once again, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is pretty late, but we are still here. We are still online and listening to your conversation. That was quite interesting, informative, inspiring, and it's several points groundbreaking. So thank you, Daniel, for setting this time aside and joining us, being so early online. And hope to see you in person someday in the future when we are all vaccinated and all this craziness slows down or even disappears one day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you and stay safe.